Hi, the book I chose to do my video analysis on this week is Abraham Lincoln, Friend of the People, and it's written by Clara Ingram Judson. Judson grew up in Indiana, and she wrote over 70 children's books throughout her career, most of them being nonfiction, and quite a few of them being biographies about U.S. presidents. So this one isn't the only one that she wrote. In 1960, she was awarded the Laurel Ingalls Wilder Medal, and it's awarded to those who have made long-lasting and substantial contributions to children's literature. Fortunately, she passed away before she could claim that award, but it was a really high honor. She also was one of the first women to ever be on air. She created her own radio show in 1928, and she was awarded the Newbery Medal 3 times throughout her career, one of those times being for the book that we're going to talk about today, which was published in 1951. I actually chose this book kind of on accident. I was originally going to be doing it on The Secret World of Walter Anderson, and I'd gone to the library to find it, and they didn't have it, and then I went to 3 separate bookstores to find it, and they didn't have it either, so I gave up and decided it was time to choose another book, and so I was kind of walking through the stacks and looking around, and I found this book, and I noticed first that it was a Newbery Honor book, which is helpful, and I've always been really interested in Abraham Lincoln and seen a lot of movies and a couple documentaries on him, but never read a book, so I figured now's as good a time as any. It seemed like it was a really well-written book. Decided to go for it. This particular book covers Abraham Lincoln's life from the time he's 5 years old to his assassination. It covers in pretty good detail his life as a child and his mother's death and his reaction to that, and then the introduction of his stepmother and the way that he was uneducated but was able to attend school for short periods of time throughout his childhood. We learned that he first started working when he was 15 years old, and that by 16 years old he was already over 6 feet. It covers when he moved away from home and when he decided to become a lawyer. It covers when he got married and started a family, and then his journey into being a politician and the ups and downs of that through to his presidency and through the war, and again ending in his assassination. I learned a lot of things from this book that I didn't know previously, again probably because I've never read a book about Abraham Lincoln. One of them was I knew that his mother had passed away, but I didn't know that he'd gotten along so well with his stepmother, or that his stepmother was still very encouraging about him getting an education, which I feel had a huge effect on him, as his father wasn't very supportive of that. Another one is I didn't know that he had held so many jobs. I knew that he'd been a store clerk and a lawyer and then president, but I didn't know how many stores he'd worked in or how many practices he was a part of or all of the jobs that kind of came in between, so I thought that was really interesting. I didn't know that he was such a good fighter. Actually, it makes sense because he was so big and strong from working so much, but I always kind of pictured him in my head as being this kind of diplomatic man, and I didn't know he was a good fighter. I didn't know that he was basically self-taught. Like I said, I did know he went to school a little bit as a kid, but not really enough, and I thought it was really interesting how many people took time to invest in his education, friends and tutors and people that he'd met, or people that allowed him to borrow books or vocabulary books and were willing to walk through that education process with him because they saw so much promise in him for the future. I didn't know that he had to borrow money for his first good suit, as he, his first step into being a politician, and had to go to someone because he realized that his clothes still looked kind of shabby, and even though he didn't care so much, he wanted to represent the people well. And to do that, he felt like he needed to get a nicer suit, and borrowed money and was able to do it and pay it back. Thought that was really interesting. I didn't know he was such a strong advocate for women's rights. He mentions it quite a few times in some of the speeches that are documented in this book, mentioning that women should have the right to vote, which I thought was interesting. I feel like that gets glanced over a lot in his politics. I don't think it ever really clicked with me that he was our first Republican president. So that was fun to learn. Mostly, I felt like this book was really, really well put together and really well written. I thought it was very, very accurate. She includes a lot of letters and dates and you can tell that she was just very knowledgeable and very informed and did a lot of research. And one of my favorite things that I thought that showed how accurate the text was she left in this letter from a girl named Grace Bedell, where she kind of encourages Mr. Lincoln, before he's president, that to grow facial hair. And so she says in her letter to him, "I've got 4 brothers. Part of them will vote for you anyway. And if you let your whiskers grow, I will try and get the rest of them to vote for you. You would look a great deal better, for your face is so thin. All the ladies like whiskers, and they would tease their husbands to vote for you, and then you would be president." I thought the content was pretty extensive, too. She covers a lot of a lifespan in under 200 pages, and I thought she covered a lot while still not being overwhelming. And I feel like the best sentence that, or portion of the book that summed up the book in general, is this last sentence at the end of the book, and it reads, "Abraham Lincoln gave his life to keep united a country dedicated to that ideal for men and women of every race and every creed." And I thought that summed up a lot of what her point was about Abraham Lincoln, and not just that he gave his life, because he did, but also that he gave up simpler kind of things that he wanted. And while he was ambitious and did want to be a politician and did want to be president, even as he's moving to the White House after he gets elected, she mentions that he's sad to leave Springfield, that he tells them that he's looking forward to coming back and getting back into his law practice, just like he'd never been president at all. And it kind of makes the point of he gave up a lot to fight the fight that he did, and it just brings a lot of new aspects to his life that I'd never really considered before. Her style of writing, she brought a lot of imagery to the story, which was nice. It reads quite a bit like a fiction book, like a historical fiction book, but of course, because it's all factual and it's true and it's accurate, it's a biography. But she put a lot of detail into the way that she explained the world that Lincoln lived in, and specifically the world he grew up in as a child. And so on page 7 here, she has a paragraph that I felt really summed up how detailed she was and how strong the imagery was in this book. "On a rainy evening, a few days after Dennis came, the family were snug in the cabin. Mrs. Lincoln was spinning wool in the corner. Sarah, on a log stool by the hearth, was knitting a sock, and the others sat before the cheerful fire. Raindrops splashed down the chimney and sizzled on hot coals, making the people feel safe and cozy inside the cabin." As far as illustration and format goes, it's not an illustrated book. It's all text, but there is each chapter is separated into portions of his life. So farm boy, or young lawyer, or Mr. President. It's sectioned off into titles of his life and the way that he changed over time. There's also a map of Lincoln's America. Here at the very beginning, there's a table of contents as well. And before that, there's a dedication page to his family. And at the back, there's an index. Let me find the beginning of that index page for you. See, got the index there. There's also an about the author at the very end, so learn a little bit more about her life. I feel like the text really enhanced my understanding of not only who Abraham Lincoln was as a president and as an advocate for freedom, but also who he was as a person before that, and what led him to being that person. And I think it's a really powerful story, too. It's a powerful story for anybody to read. It really enhanced my understanding of how far he came and where he came from and the obstacles he overcame and what he was willing to do to accomplish his dreams and to see this country start to become what he dreamt that it would be and what he knew it could be. As far as age goes, I would say this is pretty appropriate for a 6th or 7th grade reading level. It is pretty content heavy, and it also has some phonetic vernacular. In the beginning, they talk about the way that Abraham Lincoln and his family spoke, and it's written phonetically. So I feel like that would be harder for a younger reader to be able to understand and to read through and to get. Again, it's also very content heavy, so I feel, and it's pretty, it's a long book and it's kind of wordy, so I would say 6th or 7th grade for an age level. I would definitely recommend this book. I would recommend this book to a teenager. I would recommend it to a young adult. I would recommend it to an adult. I think it's a really great summary of his life. I think it includes a lot of really interesting and really important information, and I think as a whole, Judson did a really great job of writing this biography. So, thanks.